Shalom. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator, Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael, of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular presentation, not going to be, I can't even say it's not going to be long or short. But brothers and sisters, what we want to get into, if we will, in this presentation, it is called From Kemet to Compton. Now, Kemet was part of the land of Egypt in the ancient world. Kemet is not the entire country of even ancient Egypt. It's just a part of it. All right. So, with that being the case, Compton is a place in California where Black people began to live into in the 1960s very heavily. All right. So these are just some of the things that we want to get into and talk about for edification purposes. Now, I do not profess to know everything. I am open, brothers and sisters, to constructive criticism and welcome it. All right. So, brothers and sisters, get your pens, your pads, your papers, your pencils, your writing instruments, and we are going to discuss things scripture, history, external, geographical, political, social, national, and so forth. All right. So, how's everybody doing? I want to say shalom to the brother Dorayahu Ben Dora. Peace, ubaraka laka. Peace and blessings to you. All right. Brothers and sisters, for those who knew or know, I wrote a book, if we will, giving thanks to the Most High. And this book here is called From Assyria to America. And I authored it, or I used my father's name in part to give him honor. All right. The Hebrew book I wrote, Hebrew is Easy, Volume 6, is dedicated to the honor and the legacy of my mother. So we just wanted to go over that particular thing for edification purposes and so forth and so on. This aspect will go from ancient days, continuing on into a modern time. All right. Somebody asked me, did I do the presentation concerning the Sabbath? No, that brother was going to be done on so-called Thursday, Yom Khamishi, night, but I changed it to doing that in the morning. That is so-called Sunday morning, tomorrow at 10 a.m. All right. I was going to announce it in this. Thank you, my brother, for asking that. All right. So I'm going to pull this up on my phone and continue on, if we will, in this particular case. All righty. Pulling this up. Thank you for the time. Thank you to the people who joined in and so forth. All right. This presentation was going to be done last night, but don't take this the wrong way, brothers and sisters. I was tired. So I didn't do any presentation last night. I did a couple earlier today on this channel regarding Hebrew, and I did a couple regarding that, and I did one about the tribe of Dan, which is on this channel. Subscribe to the channel, share it, and so forth and so on. All right. So let us, brothers and sisters, look at this right here. This was made by request and payment to the sister Fab Aim. Going to put her name in here for those who want video editing or flyers. You can contact her. Very, very good in this particular case. All right. That's the person who does this particular matter here. Hebrew history, Untold to the Masses Part 3. There's a Part 2 that gets into the Kingdom of Israel. Before that, also on the same channel, there's a Part 1 that gets into ancient history going all the way to the slave trade. One of the things that I attempt to do, giving thanks unto the Most High, we're about to enter, before we know it, in what they call Black History Month. Israel, we need to take advantage of that because our people's ears are attentive to hear what's going on, what went on, what should be going on, and so forth and so on. Also, for us as Israel, what they call February equates with the time that of our Purim. So in the time of Esther or Hadassah, with the situation with Ahasuerus, you understand? We can sit there and use that time to talk about what happened with Israel and the Persians. We could talk about what happened with Israel after Babylon and before Greece and so forth and so on. We could talk about the things that we're going to talk about tonight on this presentation. You know what I mean? For those who are interested in such. Okay? So while our people, Black people, are going to be attentive come next month, more so it seems than any other time, to Black history, we as Black people can sit there and use that righteously and taking advantage of that respectfully to sit there and get up into that history and bring it out to our people. All righty. So, brothers and sisters, let's explain what this is here and what we're looking at. All right. From Kemet to Compton. This right here is the area in part where ancient Israel worked as slaves or was enslaved. They referred to it as Peril Nefer at one time. Later on, referred to in the Bible as Goshen or Kesen in the Greek. Later on, referred to as Avarus. This right here is the Passover papyrus. It speaks about the children of Israel keeping the Passover, which dated, brothers and sisters, prior to the time of Herod. Because in the aspect of trying to disprove Israel in history, they always ask us about Herod, the Edomite. So it shows you where their mind is at in the conscience community. What about Herod, the Edomite? And when you find Israelites being asked, I would say, what about Esau? Esau had 5 sons. Jacob had 12. All right. Esau could care less where his seed was at. Not going to argue about who understands about who Esau was when Esau could care less who he was or is. You understand? So once it comes down to that, here we got the aspect of what happened with Lachish when they took people of the tribe of Judah into captivity. And here we got a slave auction record or a slave runaway record coming out of the southern states of America. All right. So just want to show that for edification purposes. All right. Brothers and sisters, we're going to start. I'm going to be reading out of the scriptures. I will be using this version, the Gideon's version, because it's easier on my eyes. All right. In that particular case, we're going to be starting in Ezekiel, the 23rd chapter, if we will. All right. For edification purposes, we are in the scriptures, Ezekiel chapter 23, and we're going to be reading from verse 1 to verse 4. All right. And it reads as follows. The word of Yah came again unto me, saying, Son of man, there were 2 women, the daughters of one mother. They committed harlotry in Egypt. They committed harlotry in their youth. Their breasts were not embraced. Their virgin bosom was there pressed. Their names, Aholah the elder, and Aholibah her sister. They were mine, and they bore sons and daughters. As for their names, Samaria is Aholah, and Jerusalem is Aholibah. All right. So now, Ohala, brothers and sisters, means Ohel in Hebrew means tent. All right. So we want to point that out, if we will. And Ohala or Ohela means her tent. And Ohaliba means my tent is in her. So let's understand that Samaria was called Ohala, which means her tent. Samaria was the capital of the northern tribes of Israel during the time of Ahab. And we're going to be talking about Ahab in this presentation, as we did in last week's presentation called History Untold to the Masses Part 2. We're going to be talking about Ahab in this one as well. So Samaria represented the northern kingdom, the capital of the northern kingdom. First capital of the northern kingdom, brothers and sisters, was Shechem. Shechem is one of the major cities Joshua dealt with in the book of Joshua. All right. So after Shechem, you had Tirzah. And after Tirzah as the capital, you had Samaria. Samaria is the place that the Assyrians besieged. So we just want to point that out for edification purposes. Jerusalem was called Yerushalem, all right, and it was called Yerushalimu by the Assyrians. So, brothers and sisters, Jerusalem was the capital of the southern kingdom of Judah, all right, because that's where David wound up setting up his capital after defeating the Jebusites. So these are things, brothers and sisters, we just want to point out in that regard for edification purposes, if we will. Let us now, brothers and sisters, go to Ezekiel chapter 23, and we're going to be reading in verse 15. And it says the following: girded with belts around their waist, flowing turbans on their heads, all of them looking like captives in the manner of the Babylonians of Chaldea, the land of their nativity. All right, so Ezekiel, all right, chapter 23, speaking, all right, of Israel, it says that the land of Chaldea is their nativity. The nativity, or the native, the origin, land-wise, of the Israelites, shown on the map here, is Chaldea. All right, here's Babylon, here's Chaldea, here's Egypt, here is the Sinai, here is the land of Canaan that later on became where the children of Israel occupied. Here's Persia, here's Media, the Caspian Sea, Asia Minor, take Turkey if you will. And brothers and sisters, it states that Chaldea is the land of the origin of the Israelites. All right. So that's something we want to point out, if we will, for edification purposes. All right. Now, brothers and sisters, if we will, we want to explain that the Babylonians as an empire was started by Hamites. You understand? And another aspect, brothers and sisters, is that according to Root of Windsor in his book From Babylon to Timbuktu, the people who started that were people of color. All right? Brothers and sisters, we want to show, according to Gwendolyn Leake in her book, this is how the Babylonians looked for edification purposes. This is a book that you can actually like get online or so. Now, this is in black and white, but you can obviously see what we're talking about and what we're dealing with in that particular case. All right. Another thing, brothers and sisters, that we need to and want to point out in this presentation, pardon the cover, it is, yes, beat up. We have here the book of Josephus, and we want to read something out of it for edification purposes concerning the Israelites. This is in the book of Josephus, right? We in chapter 2. We are in book 2, chapter 7. All right? And it says this: Jacob, encouraged by this dream, went on more cheerfully for Egypt with his sons and all belonging to them. Now, they were in all 70. I once indeed thought it best not to set down the names of this family, especially because of their difficult pronunciation by the Greeks. But upon the whole, I think it necessary to mention those names, that I might disprove such as believe that we came not originally from Mesopotamia, but are Egyptians. Now, Jacob had 12 sons. Let's stop right there. According to Josephus, thank you, brother Dora. According to the book of Josephus, right, it says there that the people in his day and time thought the Israelites descended from the people of the Egyptians. Now, we already read in the Bible and the scriptures that Chaldea, not far from where the Babylonians were, was the origin of the land, was the original land where the Israelites came from, right? That's what it says in that particular part, right? Now, so if that is the case, brothers and sisters, we're going to want to show how, in part, the ancient Egyptians looked. This is from the 18th dynasty of Egypt. All right. This is Amos and his wife Nefertari sitting upon the throne of the Egyptians. This is how they looked. Now, this picture was taken from the book called Before the Mayflower by Laron Bennett, if we will. All right. And brothers and sisters, in that particular case, and in that particular book, is where, as pointed out, where that picture came from. So now, let us continue in this particular aspect. We want to show for reference purposes. All right. This here is the book of Tacitus, history thereof. Right. And in this particular book, in the histories, part 5 of this book, we want to read a particular excerpt from it. And it reads as follows. Speaking of the Israelites, it says this. Many again say that they were a race of Ethiopian origin, who, in the time of King Cepheus, were driven by fear and hatred of their neighbors to seek a new dwelling place. Others described them, meaning the Israelites, as an Assyrian horde, who, not having sufficient territory, took possession of part of Egypt and founded cities of their own in what is called the Hebrew country. So what is being stated right here, brothers and sisters, in the book of Tacitus, is that in his day and time, we're talking the 1st century CE or AD, they thought that the Israelites came out of a people of Ethiopian stock, of people. Brothers and sisters, we want to show how the Ethiopians look. And so, those are Cushites, brothers and sisters, or Ethiopians. So now, according to Tacitus, the Roman historian, he is saying that the people in his day and time thought that the Israelites came out of a people who were of Ethiopians. Then we see here how the Ethiopians looked. Prior to that, we read in Josephus where in his day and time, they thought the Israelites were of the Egyptians. And we see how they looked. Now, according to the scriptures, the Israelites descended from the people of the Chaldeans, adjacent to Babylon. And this is how they looked according with that. So, brothers and sisters, what we are saying in this intro, if you will, is that for sure and for definite, the children of Israel or the Israelites look like the people that we just showed. All right. Let us continue, if we will, in this particular aspect. All right. We have here, brothers and sisters, the land of Avaris, shown in ancient Egypt. We're going to read in the scriptures. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 15, if we will. Genesis in the Bible, chapter 15, and we're going to be reading in verse 13. And it reads as follows. Genesis 15, verse 13 says this. Then he said unto Abram, know certainly that your seed shall be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve, I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So what is that telling us, brothers and sisters, in that particular case, where it distinctly says that the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete? It says in the fourth generation, well, the people returned back there, meaning back to the land where Abraham was at the time, also known as the land of Canaan, right? So the 4 generations in Genesis 15, or the 400 years, the captivity that the book of Genesis is talking about is the captivity that they dealt with under the Egyptians. You had Joseph, which was the same generation as Levi. After Levi, you had Kohath. After Kohath, you had Amram. After Amram, you had Moses. The 400 years are those 4 generations. Under Moses, the people were led out of the Egyptian bondage. So these are things that we want to emphasize and talk upon for edification purposes, if we will. All right? We're going to go, if we will, in the scriptures. Genesis. All right? We're going to go in Genesis. Pardon me, Exodus. Sorry about that. Exodus chapter 1. Verse 1 through verse 11. And it reads as follows. Now these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man in his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all who were descendant of Jacob was 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly, wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it happened in the event of war that they also join our enemies and fight against us, and so get up out of the land. Brothers and sisters, one of the things to point out is concerning the captivity of the Israelites. The place where the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt is shown in a map here as the word of Varus. At certain times it was called Rawati, certain times it was called Peru Nefer. All right, so we just want to point that out for edification purposes, if we will. All right. Next, we want to show this here. This is from the Het Museum in the land of Israel. All right. This is from the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, showing a captive in there. We want to point out that one's hands is behind one's back. All righty, brothers and sisters, if we will. Going into a source book, all right? We want to read concerning the Israelites and their captivity in the land of Egypt. And it reads as follows, okay? A number of Egyptian documents refer to the Apiru from the Akkadian tongue Hapiru or Habiru, hence Hebrew. To the Egyptians, this did not mean a special racial or ethnic group, but a social concept, inferior people who were employed on forced labor. David Roll, an Egyptologist, in his book Pharaohs and Kings, states the following. Egyptologists have long recognized, excuse me, the appellation Habiru is the equivalent of the term Apiru, found in Egyptian texts dated from the Middle and New Kingdoms, whilst a number of biblical authorities have concluded that the designation Hapiru or Hapiru is also one and the same as the biblical term Ibrim. Ibrim is the Hebrew word meaning Hebrews, meaning the people. All right, so that's something, brothers and sisters, excuse me, that we want to point out for edification purposes. I want to state, when you see me moving to the side, I don't want to be on the camera drinking. That's what that is with that, okay? So, Shalom, Nariyahu, all right? Shalom, my brother or sister. I don't know the gender, so that's why I say that. Brothers and sisters, what we just read was an external source showing the aspect of the Hapiru, all right? Or now that's dated as shown there from the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, if we will. All right. We want to continue in that particular case and continue reading about that. All right. Let us continue, brothers and sisters. And it says as follows. Like the figures quoted for the Sosu or Bedouins and for the Koreans, who may derive their name, later extended to all Palestinians and Syrians, from the Hurrian invaders from the north. Immediately preceding, there is a reference to the Apiru, a much discussed term which we cannot afford to ignore. A few years ago, it was confidently asserted that these people were identical with the Hebrews of the Old Testament, but that is now denied by all but a few scholars. It is, however, generally accepted that they are to be equated with the Habiru, later Hapiru, of the Amarna tablets, apparently a generic term for outcasts or bandits, belonging to no fixed ethnic groups. In Egyptian texts, they appear as Asiatic prisoners employed in stone quarries. So, brothers and sisters, that comes from a book called Egypt of the Pharaohs by Sir Alan Gardner, what I just read, that particular aspect, that the Hapiru by many is stated to be the Hebrews of the Old Testament. Now, the Bible speaks about the Israelites being enslaved to the Egyptians. That is not denied by most who even read the Bible. The book of Josephus also speaks upon that in that particular case, which we're going to get into right now, if we will. Brothers and sisters, we're going back into the book of Josephus and read what we're going to read concerning this particular matter. All right. And it reads and follows as so. It says this. We are in the book of Josephus, book 2, chapter 9. They became very abusive to the Israelites and contrived many ways of afflicting them. For they enjoined them to cut great number of channels for the river and to build walls for their cities and ramparts, that they might restrain the river and hinder its waters from stagnating upon its running over its own banks. They set them also to build pyramids, and by all this wore them out, and forced them to learn all sorts of mechanical arts, and to accustom themselves to hard labor. Now, brothers and sisters, in the book of Josephus, it speaks about the people being made to make bricks. Now, in the book that I wrote, Egypt Talking Writing, as well as the book From Assyria to America, I contend, if you want to use that term, that the people of the Israelites, brothers and sisters, that was in the land of Egypt, was during the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. All right. Now, if we will, brothers and sisters, we want to show, because the book of Josephus says that they were made to build pyramids. This is part of the mud brick pyramids under the era of Amenemhat and Senusret. All right. Amenemhat II, as well as Senusret II, had the Asiatics, known as the Apiru, build what is referred to today as the mud brick pyramids. Now, if you remember, the Bible in the book of Exodus says that they made the children of Israel to serve at rigor and all manner of service in the field. And they also had Yisrael working in the house. So when you see, for instance, in the movie Django, when the people were stepping into the mud and all of that, just like they showed you in Cecil B. DeMille's film, The Ten Commandments, all you got to do is just know the right color of the people. You know good and well who it's talking about for a reason and purposes. All right. So this is an aspect in this. And somebody typed in, Brother Dora, about that. We want to show this again for reference purposes. All right. In that particular case, if we will. All right. So one of the things, brothers and sisters, we want to point out is this. The Israelite enslavement was not only talked about in the Bible or Josephus or Artapanus or so forth and so on. It was also, brothers and sisters, spoken about by other aspects of other peoples, namely the Egyptians. There is a writing from ancient Egypt which also dates to the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. And we're going to read a part of it, not the whole thing. This is referred to as the Epira Papyrus, if we will. All right. The Epira Papyrus, brothers and sisters, states in part, all right, cattle left to stray, each man fetches for himself. Exodus in the Bible, chapter 9, verse 19 says, gather thy cattle. And we want to read in the Bible. We're going to reading out the Gideons, as we pointed out, right? We're going to go to Exodus chapter 9, verse 21 for edification purposes. All right. And it reads as follows. Exodus chapter 9, verse 21 says this, but he who did not regard the word of Yah left his servants and his livestock in the field. Now, brothers and sisters, let's go on and see what it says. Epira part 9 and 11 says, the land is without lights. Exodus chapter 10, verse 22 says, there was thick darkness in Egypt. Epira says the following, he who places his brother in the ground is everywhere. Exodus chapter 12 says, there was not a house where there was not one dead. So, brothers and sisters, we want to point out, if we will, for edification purposes, what this is talking about and with reasoning. Okay? Are there any questions? Let me know if there are any questions concerning this particular aspect. I'm going to go and get me a water. Be right back, brothers and sisters. Sorry about that. Having to get something to drink. My fault. That's one of the issues when you're by yourself, you got to do everything by yourself and for yourself. But that's the matter there. Now, somebody asks, what is the dating of the Imperial Papyrus? That's dated to the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. All right. That is to say Dynasty 13, if we will. All right. So I just want to point that out in that particular case. All right. Give me a 1 if I can be heard. Okay. So brothers and sisters, let us continue in this particular aspect. What you're looking at here is the heretic writing of the Imperial Papyrus. Now, the Imperial Papyrus is not written, thank you for the 1, Brother Dora. The Imperial Papyrus is not written in the technical hieroglyphic aspect of the Mentionetta. This is the heretic writing. Ancient Egyptian also had what's called the Demotic writing, but this is not so. This is the heretic writing. All right. So we just went over a couple of parts of that for reference purposes, if we will. Okay. Let us continue on in this particular case. We want to read an external source concerning this kind of matter, if we will. All right. And it reads as follows. There is even a reference called the Wadi el Mukatab, and in it, the Sinaitic writing says the following in translation: the wind blowing, the sea dividing into parts. They pass over. The Hebrews flee into the sea. The sea is turned into dry land. The waters permitted and dismissed to flow, burst rushing unawares upon the astonished men, congregated from quarters, banded together to slay treacherously, being lifted up with pride. Their leader divided asunder the sea, its waves roaring. The people enter and pass through the midst of the waters. Moses causes the people to haste like a fleet-winged sea ostrich crying aloud. The sea shining bright, a mighty army propelled into the Red Sea is gathering into one. They go jumping and skipping, journeying through the open channel, taking flight from the face of the enemy. The surge of the sea is divided. The people flee. The tribes descend into the deep. The people enter the waters. The people enter and penetrate through the midst. The people are filled with stupor and perturbation. Yahweh is the keeper of the companion. Their enemies weep for the dead. The virgins are wailing. The sea flowing down overwhelmed them. The waters let loose to flow again. The people depart fugitive. A mighty army is submerged into the deep sea, the only way of escape for the congregated people. Now, brothers and sisters, the point in reading that is the writing referred to as the Wadi el Mukatab. That is a Sinaitic writing that they found in the Sinai Peninsula. And in translation of it is what we saw right there. In it, it mentions Yah. In it, it mentions Moses. In it, it mentions the Hebrews. All right. So, brothers and sisters, in the Bible, where they found that is referred to in the book of Numbers, chapter 33, as the land of Dophka. Now, when we look at this right here, as we see this here being the Sinai Peninsula, that's where they found that writing in that particular case. So again, we just want to point this out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes, if we will. All right. If there's any questions or comments, please feel free in respect to put it within the section here that we are on and addressing. Okay. If we will, brothers and sisters, let us continue in this particular aspect. We're going to go in the Bible in the book of Kings, chapter 6, if we will. We're going to go into the scriptures, chapter 6, verse 1. We have completed for this presentation, all right, the aspect of talking about the Exodus and the children of Israel in there and so forth and so on. We are now going to go into First Kings in the Bible, all right, chapter 6, verse 1, and it reads as follows. And it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziu, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of Yah. So 4 years after Solomon began to rule, equated, brothers and sisters, okay, to the aspect of the beginning of the building of the temple. Somebody asked, was that in the, no, that was in hieratic writing. All right. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you for the question in that particular case. What we just read is 4 years after Solomon began to reign. It equated to 480 years after Israel done left the land of Egypt. So now, by the time you get, say, to Yiftach in the book of Judges, all right, you get to where that is 300 years after the Exodus. They was in the wilderness for 40 years. So we beginning to see progress of time as it goes along in this particular case, if we will, right? Solomon was after the era of David. What we're seeing right here is referred to as the Danite stele. All right. Now, the part that you're seeing, all right here says Beit Dawid. Beit Dawid in that particular case. All right. So we are moving on in this particular aspect, but feel free to ask any questions concerning what we have discussed and will discuss. All right. So we want to show some things. This right here, brothers and sisters, is referred to as the Shema stele or the Shema seal. And what it says is the Shema Ebed Rabam, which means to Shema, the servant of Jeroboam. Jeroboam, be it Jeroboam the first or Jeroboam the second, I'm not too keen on. I've read information concerning that, but this right here was found in the land of the East. All right. So what can we say about any Hebrew artifact found in the Western Hemisphere, brothers and sisters, is after Israelites already migrated on their own to the West. Israelites already migrated on their own to the West. That doesn't mean because you have the Ohio Decalogue or the Los Lunas inscription that has Hebrew writing on it in North America, that does not make this our homeland. No, our homeland is in the land of the East. You had Israelite writing in Mauritania. That doesn't mean that that's the land where Jerusalem is. That just means you understand where Israelites were migrating and writing on walls. So that's something we want to point out for edification purposes. One of the things, not to get sidetracked, brothers and sisters, is how we know America, the Western Hemisphere, is not our true homeland as far as the promised land that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were promised. Is because during the era we're going to talk about with the Romans, they tried their best to make sure Israel was cut off from that land. Whereas over here in the West, they don't want us to leave. Congress told Lincoln, you're not shipping them people back. They want and need us over here in America to keep their economy and so forth going. You understand? Whereas Hadrian of Rome was like, cut them off from that land and change the name of the land. So that's how we know, if not for many other reasons, this land of the West is not our true homeland of the house of Israel. All right. So continuing on, if we will, in this particular case, here we see from the era of Sennacherib, we showed this before, Sennacherib III, all right, of the King Yehu of Israel, bowing down to Shalmaneser III. This is from the 9th century BCE. All right. Want to show that for reference purposes. Brothers and sisters, if we will, we want to go in the Bible, Ezekiel chapter 27, and we want to get into some history about what we're talking about. All right. Ezekiel, the 27th chapter, and we want to start in verse 1. And it says this as follows. Ezekiel 27:1. The word of Yah came again to me, saying, now, son of man, take up a lamentation for Tyre. not and say unto Tyre, you who are situated at the entrance of the sea, merchant of the peoples on many coastlands, thus saith the Lord God, O Tyre, you have said, I am perfect in beauty. Your borders are in the midst of the seas. Your builders are perfected, have perfected your beauty. They made all your planks of fir trees from Sinir. They took a cedar from Lebanon to make you a mast. Now, what are we talking about right here? As we see in Ezekiel chapter 27. All right, Tyre is the capital of Zidon. Zidon are Hamites, namely out of the people of Canaan. All right. Now, how do we get into this, brothers and sisters? It's because the Zidonians, along with Israelites, merged and formed what the Greeks later on called the people of the Phoenicians. Let us continue and show what we're talking about. Let's continue in Ezekiel chapter 27. All right. And we're going to start again however, in verse 13 and read as follows to see biblically what we are talking about. All right. Now, as pointed out in the past, as in last week's presentation called History Untold to the Masses Part 2, I spoke about how Ahab was married to the Zidonian queen, all right, named Jezebel. The Israelites, namely from the tribe of Zebulun, the Zebulun, Asher, Issachar, joined on with the Zidonians and went over to Carthage, which is in northern Tunisia. All right. And this is later on that we're reading in Ezekiel after Ahab's matter. And let's see what it continues to say in verse 13. Ezekiel 27:13 says the following. All right. Javan, Tubal, and Meshach were your traders. They bartered human lives and vessels of bronze for your merchandise. Those from the house of Togarmah traded for your wares and horses, steeds, and mules. The men of Dedan were your traders. Many owls were the market of your hand. They brought you ivory, tusk, and ebony as payment. Syria was your merchant because of the abundance of goods you made. They gave you for your wares emeralds, purple, embroidery, fine linen, corals, and rubies. Judah and the land of Israel were your traders. They traded for your merchandise wheat of Minnith, millet, honey, oil, and balm. Damascus was your merchant because of the abundance of goods you made, because of your many luxury items, with the wine of Helbon and with white wool. Dan and Javan paid for your wares, traversing back and forth. Wrought iron, cassia, and cane were among your merchandise. Brothers and sisters, this is talking about the people that the Zidonians did trade with. One of the things it says is that concerning Tarshish, concerning Javan, Tubal, and Meshach, it says they traded in for human lives. Javan are the Greeks. Now, as we know in the book of Joel, it says that the people of Israel was sold unto the people of Javan by the Zidonians, far from Judah's border. So, brothers and sisters, you had it to where they was trading off the children of Israel. And of course, Israel, not understanding, did in business with these people of the later on known as the Phoenicians. Brothers and sisters, it mentions Judah in the land of Israel. It mentions Dan in verse 19. Now, why do we go into this? When you go into history, you will find out that some people state that movie called 300, talking about the people that was in Greece, well, in part the tribe of Dan. That's one of the theories and teachings that the movie 300 was trying to emulate, people are saying. All right. So whether that be the case or not, we know good and well that there were Israelites either by force and by minority in their own way in the lands of the Europeans. So that's something we want to talk about for reference purposes. All right. Now, thank you, Brother Dora, for mentioning the aspect of Carthage in verse 12. Brothers and sisters, what we want to get into next concerning this, if we will, right, is a secular source concerning this kind of matter. And we're going to read what it says in that particular way. All right. The people known as the Phoenicians in time went to the place called later in history as Carthage. They were of a Hebrew-speaking type, according to the historian Will Durant. There are burial grounds which have Hebrew inscriptions on them by the area called Gamart. Hebrew writing on catacombs were found there, according to the historian Nahum Schultz. This is mentioned in the book Hebrewisms of West Africa. During the 9th century, that's to say the 9th century BCE, the relations between the house of Tyre, Zidon, that is, Israel and Judah were still close. Jezebel was married to Ahab. Their daughter Atalia was married to Jehoram, the king of Judah. So you had Ahab's son-in-law was the king of Judah. So you had the Zidonians in Israel and Judah all becoming one through marriage and interlocking themselves in that particular way, which was not a good thing for the house of Israel. Nonetheless, we want to show how in history that wound up playing a part in the scattering of the Israelites. Now, how does this particular picture of Jehu being shown bow down to the Assyrian king get into this? Assyria coming up as a world power. Every time the Israelites saw an enemy come into power against them or coming up as a power that would be a potential enemy, Israel had a tendency to flee, run away, if you will. One of the things the Kemetic community stated about Israelites is anytime you had problems, y'all ran to Egypt. Not only to Egypt did we run to as Israel, we ran to Libya, we ran to Ethiopia, we ran to Carthage, we ran to Saudi Arabia. You might want to get a book called From Babylon to Timbuktu that gets into the diaspora of Israel. Now, brothers and sisters, and continuing on, okay, in this particular realm, Jehu, as we see here, ended the Omride dynasty. So you had Omri and Ahab, all right? Then you had Ahab's son and Ahab's other son who ruled. Name slipped my mind, pardon me. But during that same time, Jehu killed Jehoram of Israel, and then he started a dynasty. But later on, Jehu sadly began to worship the gods that Ahab got rid of. All right? Somebody asks, was I talking about the Neo-Syrian Empire? Yes, in parts, Brother Dora. I was talking about the Assyrian Empire in part. When Assyria came up as a power, all right, we talking in the world, we're talking about the 9th century BCE, the Shalmaneser the third, and so forth and so on, is when you begin to see a lot of Israelites going over to Tunisia, Northern Africa. All right, just wanted to show that in that particular case. Now, Jehu, shown here, ended the Omride dynasty. Omri was the father of Ahab. Ahab was the father of Jezebel. We already know about the story with Elijah and Elisha, with Jezebel and so forth and so on. So these are just things to show what we're talking about for reference purposes. During that same time is what Ezekiel 27 is recounting centuries after it happened about the Israelites being in cahoots with the people of Tyre, aka the capital of Zidon, Zidon being of the Canaanite people. So, brothers and sisters, we want to continue on in this particular case, if we will, right? Reading again from a select secular source, all right? And it reads as follows, if we will. Phoenician kings were helping the Israelites kings in building. Omri was the father of Ahab. In the Bible, Micah chapter 6 states the following: for the statutes, meaning the idols, or Omri are kept, and all the works of the house of Ahab, and ye walk in their counsels, that I may make you an astonishment, and the inhabitants thereof a hissing, and ye shall bear the reproach of my people. Now that's in Micah chapter 6. He was a person that was an Israelite that was prophesying and proclaiming things to the northern kingdom of Israel. It says that the statues of Omri are kept. Last week, we showed part of those statues that it's talking about. So we just want to show how the history connects for edification purposes, all right? So, brothers and sisters, if we will, let us go on and continue in this particular aspect. Remember, we spoke, right, about the Assyrians coming up as a power in the world, right? Here we see, as pointed out in the before about the Assyrians taking people of Judah into captivity. Now, when I say of Judah, I'm talking about the Judite kingdom. Does it mean that they were not of the tribe of Levi or Simeon or Benjamin? Lachish was a city in the land of Judah. All right. But Lachish, brothers and sisters, could have been inhabited by any of the 12 tribes as individuals. All right. Somebody asks, what is the source you're reading from? All right. I'm going to be candid on that. Thank you for the question. The source that I was reading from when I said a secular source, right, is my book. This is a secular source. And in it, in the conclusion, I was going to sit there and state that. All right. So when I read about certain things and I said I'm reading from a secular source, it's from my book that I gathered some information. Thank you for that. I was going to say it at the end and give more information, but I want to answer the brother's question directly as asked. Thank you for the question, my brother. All right. So now, in this particular case, right here, we see the Assyrians leading people of Lachish from the land of Lachish into the Assyrian captivity. So, brothers and sisters, what we want to do in this particular case is show the other aspect. Then this is from the aspect of Sennacherib. All right? In this particular case. Brother, you don't have to feel sorry for saying spoiler. No. When someone asks, listen, family, brothers and sisters. When you do a presentation and somebody asks you a question, answer the question. I learned that in marketing. Hello, I'm stopping by on behalf of such and such. How much is it? Answer the question directly and continue with your pitch or continue with your speech. You understand? You can't present yourself as a presenter and then when someone asks a question, say, shrug it off, ask me later. Zelotob, that's not good. Answer the question directly. You understand? I didn't invite nobody. Well, actually, 2 people in the inbox I did invite. But the point I'm saying is, if you're presenting yourself and if you're saying, blessed be the Most High, and that's whose name you're coming in, and you got the free will spirit to speak about the Most High, make sure you come as correct as possible and be humble enough to correct yourself. Because, see, I'm not a prophet. So if I state a wrong date or anything like that, I stand to be corrected. So it's never a thing, my brother, to say, sorry for the spoiler. Because if you ask me where I get my sources and what I'm reading out of, I have to respect the audience, you as a man, the people as grown men and women, and answer the question. That's just respect which trumps knowledge in that particular case. So it's not a spoiler. I'm still going to go at the end and explain the book itself. All right? Thank you. In that particular aspect, my friend and my brother. This right here is still showing from the Lachish aspect. All right? In this particular case. This is from the Sennacherib War for those who are interested in that particular realm. All right? So, brothers and sisters, let us go, if we will. And I would like to read out of a book. Now, this is not the book I wrote. It's a different one. But this is called The Bible as History and Pictures on page 251. We read this in another presentation years ago, but we want to show it in this one here. Here's what it says. All right? If I can be heard, give me a 1. As for Hezekiah of Judah, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong-walled cities, as well as innumerable small cities, in their neighborhood, I besieged with scaling ladders, siege engines, infantry, breaches, mines, and tunneling, and I conquered them. Brothers and sisters, this is more from the Sennacherib War. And what happened with the Israelites. The nations memorialized getting at us. The nations memorialized defeating us. This is also from that particular aspect. Now, in the Bible, when you go into the book of Isaiah, the 36th chapter, we're going to read about that. Let us do so now. We are going back into the book, the scriptures. Isaiah chapter 36 and verse 1. And it reads as follows. All right. So we can gain biblical understanding of where we're coming from in this particular aspect. Isaiah 36, verse 1 says, Now it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Then the king of Assyria sent the Rabshakeh with a great army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem, and he stood by the aqueduct of the upper pool and the highway of the Phyllis field. Brothers and sisters, Hezekiah was the last king that Isaiah mentions that he prophesied to. So that's something we want to point out. During the era of Hezekiah of Judah is when the Assyrians were still showing their power, having already defeated, the peoples before them, having defeated the Medes in war and so forth and so on, right? Now, Babylon defeated the Assyrians by joining on with the Scythians as well as the Medes. So yeah, Babylon, Media, and the Scythians together, all three, went against the Assyrians and defeated them. As time went on, we know that Jeremiah, who began to prophesy, pointed out in last week's presentation, during the era of Josiah of Judah. Later on, he was taken when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem into Egypt. All right? We want to show this here, as it says, Jeremiah's journey to Egypt. Now, this was, believe it or not, a willing journey. Jeremiah was actually taken there by force. He went by force into southern Egypt, along with the Israelites that was there. So now, let us go back, if we will, into the scriptures. We're going to read in Jeremiah 44, verse 1, so we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about for edification purposes. So far, we've gone over the Israelites in Egypt in ancient times. We've gone over and talked about the Israelites in the Sinai. We talked about the Israelites dealing with the aspect of the Zidonians. And now, brothers and sisters, we're talking about the effect of the Assyrian and now the Babylonian empires regarding the house of Israel. All right, we're going to Jeremiah chapter 44 and verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews who dwell in the land of Egypt, who dwell at Migdol, at Tapanhes, at Noth, in the country of Patros. That's Jeremiah 44. All right. So that's something we want to talk about in that particular case and in that particular aspect. All right. If we will. Brothers and sisters, we want to go into another aspect with the notes that are here. Okay. Let us do so. While the Israelites was, as we see here, taking their prophet Jeremiah into the land of Egypt, right? Okay, the brother was saying Isaiah and Hosea were contemporary prophets with Jeremiah and Ezekiel. No, Aki, not exactly. All right, let me explain. Isaiah was after Hosea, but they were around the same time. And between the time of Isaiah and Jeremiah, you had the king Manasseh who ruled for 50 something years. So pardon me, he ruled for 55 years. So there's about 50 to 60 years from the death of Isaiah to the calling of Jeremiah as a prophet. So now Isaiah and Hosea, yes, were contemporary, as were Jeremiah and Ezekiel, but they were not all four contemporary with each other, if we're doing the timeline in that case. All right, just wanted to go over that, told out for that comment. All right, now we have here extra biblical sources for Hebrew and Jewish history. Again, part of the cover. All right. And in here, we're going to read, brothers and sisters, about external source of the Israelites. Now, this right here might be new information to some and not to others. All right. In here, we read this. I am Misha, son of King Mosh, king of Moab, the Debonites. My father was king over Moab 30 years, and I became king after my father. And I made this high place for their God in their place because he saved me from all the kings, and because he caused me to see my desire on all them that hated me. Goes on to say, Omri, king of Egypt, had afflicted Moab many days, because their God was angry with his land, and his son succeeded him. And he also said, I will oppress Moab. In my days he said thus, but I saw my desire upon him, and upon his house, and Israel perished utterly forever. Now Omri took possession of the land of Medeba, and Israel dwelt in it, his days and half of his son's days, 40 years. But their God restored it in my days. And the men of Gad occupied the land of Ataroth from of old. And the king of Israel built Ataroth for himself. And I found against the city, and I fought against the city and took it, and put to death all the people from the city. A gazing stock, Silika, unto their God and unto Moab. And I removed from thence the altar earth of Dawid or David, and I dragged it before their God in their place, and I called the men of Sharon and the men of Makharat to settle therein. And the king of Israel had built Yahaz and occupied it while he fought against me, but their God drove him out before me. I took from Moab 200 men and all its clans, and led them against Yahaz, and took it, and added it to Dibon. Now, why did I want to read, all right, the aspect of Misha and the names that he was talking about in this particular case? If we go in the scriptures, going back into the book of books, Numbers chapter 32, we want to read in this particular case, if we will. It says in Numbers 32, now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of livestock. And when they saw the land of Yazir and the land of Galaad, that indeed the region was a place for livestock. The children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spoke unto Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, Atarot, Dibon, Yazir, Nimra, Heshbon, Eliah, Shabam, Nebo, and Beon, the country which Yah defeated before the congregation of Israel, is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. All right, brothers and sisters, Numbers chapter 32 mentions Atarot and Dibon and Yazir. When we read what the king of Moab, Misha, stated, he mentions the men of Gad took Atarot. All right, we're going to read that part again because we already read about the tribe of Gad, right, in the book of Numbers. So let's go back to this part here and see what it says and read this part again. And the men of Gad occupied the land of Atarot from of old. So by the time King Misha is around, the era of Moses of the Israelites is old to him. So when he said the men of Gad occupied it, we could correspond that aspect from Misha of Moab to what we see in the Bible or in the scriptures in Numbers, the 32nd chapter. So this is how Torah thinks to the Most High, how a brother is able to sit there and get into this kind of presentation at this particular aspect, showing the correspondence between the Israelites and the world. And brothers and sisters, not trying to play salesman, but I would like to show, if we can, this particular book right here that gets into this very intensely. This book here, which was, thanks to the Most High, released last month. All right. Israelite history as it relates to the world, in which I speak upon those kind of things and in those particular aspects. All right. This is available for those who want it on Amazon. All right. So if we will, brothers and sisters, let us continue in this particular case. All right. We're going to go into history, brothers and sisters, and show what we're talking about. All right. Let us go, if you will, brothers and sisters, into the Bible, into the book of Daniel. We're going to go to Daniel chapter 7, if we will. All right. And we're going to read 8 verses out of Daniel chapter 7 and go over some history in this particular aspect. And it reads as follows. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like a bear, and it raised itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, and it had great iron teeth. It was devouring and breaking in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and the mouth speaking great things. Brothers and sisters, now, when we look at this in the book of Daniel, he's living in the Babylonian, going into the Median Persian Empire, right? So now, excuse me, when we look in that particular case and aspect, Babylon came up as a kingdom, brothers and sisters, during the time after Assyria's fall. We're talking 605, 606 BCE to 538 BCE. The Babylonian kingdom fall into the Medes and the Persians. All right, when the last king of Babylon, Nabonidus, lost to Cyrus. This is Cyrus II, the father of Cambyses II. So now you have Persia coming up in 538, 539 BCE, and they're in power to the time when Darius Commodus, Darius III, lost to Alexander, the son of Philip of Macedon, in the Battle of Gargamella in 331 BCE, after losing to him in the Battle of Isis 2 years before that. All right. Then you have Greece coming up as a power. And Greece remained basically as a power from 331 era BCE all the way, if we go into the aspect of 146 BCE, when a guy named Mummius of Rome defeated the Greeks in what they call the Third Corinth battle in 146 BCE. So Rome comes up as a power in 146 BCE. By the time they now get into the AD or the CE or the Anno Domini, that's a whole nother matter, or CE or the Common Era, from 146 BCE to 476 CE or AD, brothers and sisters, Rome is a power, okay? Before that, in the what they call the War of the 3rd century AD, you had Diocletian and Maximilian that separated, and then you had the Eastern and Western Roman Empire. The Western Roman Empire falling in 476. Why? Because of your wickedness. That's why. All these kingdoms that fell, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, Israel, before then, it's all because of your wickedness. That's why you fell. Rome, you up there sleeping with the man's wife. And when he comes back from fighting the Vandals or whoever, he come back after a year battle and his wife is 8 months pregnant because the senator saw your wife while you was at the war. So by the time you get the Avars and then later on, and people's like that, Rome is like, I ain't fighting for you. You disrespected my home. And that's what happened. That was what caused many people to even want to desert defending the Roman Empire themselves. All right. Not too long after the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, in 1453, you already had the slave trade going on from 1440. So while Byzantine Empire was already in existence, the slave trade already done started. So this is what we want to talk about and get into in this presentation called From Kemet to Compton. All right, now, brothers and sisters, you had it to where, speaking about the Greeks, if we will, which is the greatest and first of the Roman then later on England, then later on Byzantine, and then later on Spain and France. These are those 10 horns that Daniel chapter 7 is talking about. 10 different European kingdoms that came up. And then one came up from among them that was diverse from the rest. I've been teaching brothers and sisters for a while that that little horn that spoke words against the Most High and wore out the saints of the Most High is America. Because America defeated 3 different European powers in order to become an empire. The Quasi-War against the French, the Spanish-American War, and then the Revolutionary War as well. Those 3 wars, the Quasi-War between America and France, the situation that was in the like the 1800s. Then you had also the situation with Spain, the Spanish-American War. That was during the era when you get to Lincoln and that kind of matter around that particular time in the 1840s, when before Lincoln was president. We're going to talk about that guy in a second. And then you had prior to that the Revolutionary War, when America defeated the British after deserting the British. That's what I've been teaching, correct me if I'm wrong, about those 3 that was plucked up by the roots by this little horn. And in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. This little horn, brothers and sisters, would have you to think an organization that was selling lunches to school children, known as the Black Panthers, was bad. But just like last week, being that it's now Saturday night, the evening takes on to a new week, this so-called past Wednesday, when they stormed the Capitol, you know good and well, if those people look like us, pop, 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 they would have been picking up bodies, not looking for people that they saw on camera. That we need to find out why they did that. It's part of the great words that that horn spoke. Part of the great words, great don't mean good, by the way, that that horn speaks. When that guy Taney, who was part of the Supreme Court, told Dred Scott, in so many words, N-word, you're not even a citizen. We don't have to respect you. And that was done back in the 1850s. So brothers and sisters, these are the kinds of things that we want to talk about for reference purposes, if we will. Somebody asked, was the little horn Antiochus Epiphanes? No, not from the teaching that I understand it to be. I'll explain why. That little horn that we read in Daniel chapter 7, verse 8, my brother, is after Greece fell. See, Greece in Daniel chapter 7, right, is the leopard that had 4 wings on his back. Those 4 wings being Cassander, Ptolemy, Antigonus, and Seleucus. All right, so those were those 4 with that. That's in verse 6. I was talking, my brother, about the little horn in Daniel 7, verse 8, in that particular case. All right, so now getting back to what we was talking about. Thank you for that comment or question, my brother. Definitely appreciate that. All right. Wanted to continue in this particular case. Please do not hesitate to leave your comments, questions, and let it be known, not being funny, that I'm still heard, not that I'm here to be heard, but I hope it's not a thing in which the computer so messes up and a brother cannot be heard. Now, what we're looking at here, getting back to this, right, is part of the Elephantine Papyrus. Elephantine is a place in southern Egypt where Jeremiah was taken. All right. We read about that in Jeremiah chapter 44, if we will. Right. We want to read from a source concerning what they were saying in the Elephantine Papyrus matter. Okay. And it reads as follows. Okay. Want to make sure I get the right page. And it reads as follows. All right. Thank you, my friend. Document 1 of the Elephantine Papyrus translated. Now thy servants Yedoniah and his companions speak thus, in the month of Tammuz, all right, July to August, in the 14th year of King Darius, when Arsames or Arsam departed and went to the king, the priest of their god, whatever their Egyptian god was, in the fortress of Yeb. Yeb is Elephantine. All right, so we want to point that out. Yeb is Elephantine. Okay. In the fortress of Yeb entered a conspiracy with Wade Rang, who was the governor here, as follows: the temple of the god Yahoo and the fortress of Yeb shall be removed. Now, that's part of the Elephantine Papyrus. And it was talking about not having, brothers and sisters, the temple that would have been dedicated to the Most High, even in the land of Egypt. When we go into the book of Isaiah, chapter 19, it says that they will build the temple and shall proclaim the name of Yah and perform a vow. That's talking about the Israelites. That's in Elephantine. What do we want to point out? Not only were the Israelites in Elephantine, which is in southern Egypt, which you're going deep into Africa at this point, right? They were used to going there. If they were used to going there, then why do we think that the Israelites went to Rome on their own accord in the thousands? No. There were Israelites scattered from one end of the earth to the other. But if you left it up to Israel themselves, they're going to run into African places. Like Jeroboam did. Like King Jeroboam did, as stated. Like Uriah the prophet did. Like David when he dwelt with the Philistines, who were descendants of the Egyptians. It was not an uncommon thing for the Israelites to run into Egypt and thus into other places. We have to remember, southern Egypt blended into northern Nubia. Southern Nubia blended into Cush. So we already went over in the beginning how the Cushites, the Egyptians, and the Chaldean people already looked. We already explained that in the beginning of this presentation. So it was not hard looking like these people to blend in with these people. This is how we know that the later on redactors with the Talmud, like Rashi and so forth, has nothing to do with us. We didn't teach concepts as Israel, Ham lied, and then he got big lips. That's not our teaching. We didn't teach that. That's not our book. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to point out. All right. Somebody asked the brother Dora, why do you think that our brothers and sisters at Yeb did not go back to Jerusalem at this time when the temples was up and running and the priests had established to celebrate the sacred times? By the time they was in Elephantine, during the time of Jeremiah, when they took him to Egypt, my brother, Babylon had destroyed the temple Solomon built. If you remember, you were saying, if I remember right, that Jeremiah and Ezekiel, yes, were contemporary with each other. Ezekiel was taken to the land of Babylon during the era of King Jehoiachin of Judah, who was the grandson of Josiah. All right. The temple was still up while Ezekiel was being taken captive. While Ezekiel was in Babylon is when the temple was destroyed after the reign of Zedekiah of Judah. All right. Jeremiah prophesied to Zedekiah. So while sadly Nebuchadnezzar had the eyes of Zedekiah put out and the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar's mans, if you will, if you want to put it in today's term, Nebuzaradan, after that temple was destroyed by Solomon, Israel took Jeremiah and went into southern Egypt. So they wouldn't go back there in regards with the temple because they was already building another temple in Elephantine. Elephantine, as we already know, is also known as Yeb. So this is just something to point out in that particular case. When in 409 BCE, their temple was destroyed, they sent a letter to the high priest of the time. The government did not send funds to help them out. That is absolutely right in that particular case. That is definitely the truth in that particular aspect. We're talking what happened later on in the 5th century BCE in that particular case, because you had the Egyptians that was upset of the Israelites that was there in this era that the brother Dora put inside the comment, 409. That was, if we were following, right, that's Medo-Persian Empire. Remember, Babylon fell, all right, 538, 539 BCE. Medo-Persia fell 331. So 409 is in between that time. So that's why it's very important. If you want to understand juicy Israelite history, read about that era with the Persians and the Medes and the Israelites. There's a lot of info in there. We're going to endorse a book that gets into it. Hint, on Amazon. All right, let's continue, brothers and sisters, in this particular case. Again, do not hesitate to leave comments, questions. It's all good. I appreciate the correspondence. This is not a lecture. This is a presentation. Okay? So, let's go, if we will, to Jeremiah chapter 50. And we're going to let the book speak, all right? We in Jeremiah chapter 50, right? Chapter 50, verse 17. And it says the following, if we will, for edification purposes. Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. First the king of Assyria devoured him. Now at last this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had broken his bones. Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 33 said the following. Thus saith Yah of hosts, the children of Israel were oppressed together along with the children of Judah. All who took them captive have held them fast. They have refused to let them go. So brothers and sisters, in Jeremiah chapter 50, we want to put this in the chat, all right? 50, verse 17, and verse 33, it gives us the names of the captors in that regard. Syria and Babylon, the lions. If you remember, the symbol of Assyria was the lion in part. The symbol of Babylon was the lion in part. All right, so let's point something out, if we will. Sidebar. Babylon, Israel, Assyria didn't have lions native to their lands. I want to type this one in. Lions were not, no, as a matter of fact, let me type it like this. Babylon, Assyria, and Judah. Lions were not native to those lands. Now, what am I pointing out in saying that? How does Babylon have images of lions as part of like their country emblem, you may say? Same as Assyria, the Lion of Judah. The Gadites had faces like lions in the book of Chronicles. Why are Israelites, Babylonians, and Assyrians talking about lions when lions are not native to their land? There's an answer for that. We won't put it in caps. Trade. Lions are native to Ethiopia and Kenya and places like that. So that shows you, even if we talk about ancient Egypt, with the Nakara from what they call the first dynasty of Egypt, they had images of lions on there. But lions are not indigenous to Egypt, Israel, Babylon, or Assyria. Lions are not indigenous to that. So with that being the case, that just goes to show you that nations were in trade one with another. So I say, brothers and sisters, knowing what we're talking about, all of this history, and corresponding it with what's written within the book and external from the scriptures itself, right? Israel, we cannot be ignorant of politics, ancient or modern. Now, ancient may not help us today as much as we may need to know what's going on in today's time where we at. But one of the things to point out is that ancient Israel was not benighted or ignorant of the societies around them. They knew the world that they was in. They knew the world they was in. So we need to know the world that we're in. It's one thing to know and say the Most High will do what he will do. We already know that. But we also know, as in the case of Esther, where the Most High's hand is moving within kingdoms. So there's nothing wrong with knowing what's going on in that particular aspect. All right? Good question, Moray. They sent a letter to the son of Sanballat for helping, and they sent help for them and not the government of the time. All right? Just something to think of. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to continue, brothers and sisters, in this particular case, if we will. Right? Secular source. After we show the picture we're talking about. Because we already spoke about the Medes and the Persians, right? And coming up as a power. This right here is what is referred to as the Zenon Papyrus. All right. Spelt that so as this in English. The Zenon Papyrus I first read about inside of a Bible dictionary, and then I looked it up. And this is what I came across when reading about the Zenon Papyrus, if you will. All right. Here's what it says. During the Greek era, this is when the Ptolemies was ruling over the land of Egypt. And this is what they had to say, believe it or not, of the Israelites. Let's listen to this, brothers and sisters. All right. This is how the Israelites are described in the Zenon Papyrus. Dark skin, stop. Curly hair, stop. Black eyes, stop. Now, when I'm saying stop, it doesn't say it. I'm just saying it. In shock, you might say. The Zenon Papyrus, which is dated to the era of the Ptolemy rule over Egypt. This is how they describe the Israelites that was in Egypt. We already showed them going to Egypt, if we will, since the Elephantine matter, as we talked about. It describes the Israelites as dark skin, curly hair, black eyes, rather big jaws, uncircumcised. That's not surprising. Nose flat, protruding lips, fiery complexion, long straight hair, scar above the right eye. So you had Israelites described as dark skin, protruding lips, a flat nose, long straight hair, or curly hair. You know what curly hair is today called, brothers and sisters? Naps. Nappy hair is nothing but a curl that's tight. Who is that? When you read in the book of Isaiah, if you will, it says concerning a woman in Isaiah, the 3rd chapter, instead of well set hair, there shall be baldness, which was part of the curse that came upon the daughters of Zion, right? The part in Isaiah 3 that says well set hair is the Hebrew word ma'aseh mikshe. Ma'aseh, brothers and sisters, means the doing or the action of. Mikshe, all right, we want to say here, mik. She comes from the word kwasha. The word kwasha means difficult or hard. I know sisters who have to get up early because they have a difficult time with dealing with their hair. Women of other nations don't have to deal with that like sisters do. You know why some sisters get locks? It's so they ain't got to sit there and deal with their hair being difficult every morning. You know why some sisters get a weave? Because they ain't got to deal with their hair. I have 3 sisters. You understand? Biological. And I'm related to females. And I've courted with females. You understand? And they were all of our people. And so my point in all of that is I know, not to be arrogant in this, I know what I'm talking about. So when we go in Isaiah, the 3rd chapter, when it says, I say mikshe, and mikshe from the word kwasha, which means difficult or hard, regarding their hairstyle, you don't find the women of the other nations having a difficult time with their hair like the so-called black women. So who the people Isaiah was talking about and talking to was sisters of today, just in the ancient time. All right. If I can be heard, give me a 1 so we can understand what we're talking about for edification purposes. Brothers and sisters, let us continue in this particular regard. All right. We have, brothers and sisters, in this presentation, we're going to read from a secular source, if we will, right? And here's what it says in the history. The next people to attack the Israelites were the Greeks. After the death of Alexander, there were 4 rulers. Alexander died in 323 BCE, and in the year 301, the war of Ipsus had Antigonus removed and replaced with Lysimachus. The 2 of the 4 generals after Alexander most important to the Israelites were Ptolemy and Seleucus. Antiochus III, the Seleucid, captured Jerusalem in 198 BCE. The time before that, Jerusalem was held under the hegemony of the Ptolemies. Antiochus IV captured Jerusalem in 168 BCE. The Maccabean revolt from 168 to 142 BCE occurred. To give an account of the Maccabees, let us do this. Brothers and sisters, that book that I cited, all right, is this book here. Egypt talking writing. Part in the cover. That's how it looks on the side. All right. More information on that in this book. All right. Those books you can get on Amazon. So just want to show the history that we're talking about for edification purposes. All right. Let us, brothers and sisters, continue in this particular regard. What we're looking at, Greece done fell, right? So now you got Rome coming up. Look at this here. This is the Hellenos Papyrus. Brothers and sisters, we want to show what we're talking about. Blessed be the Most High. This is the Hellenos Papyrus. So now when people in the conscious community, can you show any evidence of the Israelites in history? We're going to do that tonight as we've been doing. All right? That's the Hellenos Papyrus. So let's see inside of a book, and I want to cite the book. It is called The Jews Under Roman Rule. All right? And we're going to read in this book, okay, on page 232 and see what it says in this particular regard. All right? Let's go. It says this. On a sadly mutilated papyrus regarding the Jew Hellenos' petition, the word Laographia occurs 3 times, and a point of the document seems to be that the petitioner is claiming exemption. Although a Jew, meaning of house of Israel, the byword, okay, on the strength of his father's status as an Alexandrian and his own Greek education. So what is Hellenos in this papyrus talking about? Why they were being displaced by the Greeks and the Edomites from their land. All right? That's what this is talking about in this particular case. This guy, Hellenos, who was an Israelite during that time, he was basically saying, I'm an Alexandrian. I have my degree. But he was lineally of the Israelites. But he had to try to play the role of, I'm educated by the Greeks in order to sit there and try to be politically right with the people. What's the difference with that and black mayors of today? Some say you got to do what you got to do. There's nothing wrong with that. That's intelligence. Daniel knew about Babylon. Joseph definitely knew about Egypt. So these are things you understand that we want to point out for edification purposes. Use your wisdom. Okay? Now, brothers and sisters, we want to go into a secular source, if you will, and read and show what we're talking about. In this presentation called, all right, From Kemet to Compton. And here's what we read in this particular aspect. All right? And it says as follows. The conflict that we commonly hear of 70 AD is a battle that was from 66 to 73 AD. The significant matter of 70 AD is that is when the temple was destroyed. The battle still continued. There were 2 other battles. The Kittos battle in 115 to 117 CE, which was fought between the Romans and the Israelites during the era of Trajan in Libya, which is in North Africa, and the matter of Bar Kokhba battle in 132 to 135 CE during the era of Hadrian. Hadrian changed the name of Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina and the name of Israel to Palestine. Israel, the land, was called Palestine by Hadrian of Rome. Hadrian of Rome, nationality-wise, was a Spaniard. His ancestry goes back to Spain. You understand? With that being the case, Spain, outside of Portugal, was the worst concerning our people in the enslavement. Did you know that? Did you know that black people in New York, in many cases, can trace their genealogy going back to Mozambique and Madagascar during the slave trade? Did you know about the Jews of Madagascar that Rudolph Windsor spoke about in the book From Babylon to Timbuktu? Brothers and sisters, we're citing our sources and references. The Portuguese used to bring black people from East Africa to Manhattan and New York. The Portuguese used to bring black people from Cuba to New York in slavery. Did you know that Citibank got its money during the slave trade? Did you know that the cotton that was picked in the South was shipped as far as East India? Did you know why the South was saying, bump Lincoln? We're going to keep the language clean. There's some words when you're doing research that they use. I was very surprised. You know what I mean? We're going to keep the language clean. There's elders. We're talking about the scriptures. There's children. I want the presentation to be for elders and children. But some of the wording that they called their leaders who wanted to not even stop slavery, but not cause it to expand, they called them some words I will not say out of my mouth in the newspapers. You understand? Us adults can kind of figure what it's talking about. You understand? So, brothers and sisters, what can we say concerning this kind of matter? We're going to read some of the things here. Brother or sister Sham B 508 says facts. Brother Dora said the white Portuguese and not the black Portuguese. Yeah, that gets into a whole other aspect. All right, not denying what you're saying on that. Sham B 508 said Bank of America was complicit also. Well, that's how America, for sure, my friend. That's how America in part got its bank. Now, not going to jump on a gun. We're going to talk about that aspect. But did you know, brothers and sisters, that when Lincoln said that we should ship the people back to Africa, we want slavery to expand. When you read about the Civil War being talked about from the 1820s, Bleeding Kansas, the situation that happened in the 1850s, and so forth and so on, Lincoln was saying keep the slavery only in the South. The people in the South said let it expand. Who said let it be annihilated? Nobody. I'm going to repeat this again. The Southern planters, who were the slave masters, was saying let slavery expand west. The North was saying keep only slavery in the South. So you had the North saying it and the South saying what they were saying. And nobody was saying we should end slavery. Slavery ending due to the Civil War was not something that they intended. The Most High let that happen. The Most High let Judah and his brothers that were in North American captivity get a reprieve for a little while during that enslavement. It was not the intention of the North nor the South to end slavery. That was the doing of Yah that caused that. A power above us all. So, brothers and sisters, let us get back, if we will, into this. Here we see, all right, the Romans coming against Jerusalem, if you will, right? You have from Rome, they're going descending, they're going south to where the Israelites were at. Then we see the Israelites going from where the Romans had attacked them further south into Africa. So you have Rome going against the people in Israel. Then you got the people of Israel fleeing into Africa. See how that worked? See, that's what happened in that particular case, if we will. All right. It's funny, brother or sister, that you mentioned the Gullah Wars. I was going to present that in a future book, but keep the comments coming. We building on this. That's a beautiful thing. But yes, the Gullah Wars definitely has something to do with that as well. Thank you for the comment. All right. Talking about the Civil War matter and so forth and so on with South Carolina. Now, brothers and sisters, let it continue on in this particular case, if we will. We're going to go into the scriptures itself and let it speak. We're going to go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 21. See what it says in this particular case, if we will. Deuteronomy or Devarim, chapter 28, verse 21. And it says the following. The Most High will make the plague cleave to you until he has consumed you from off the land, whether you go into possess. The plague, hadeber in the Hebrew, deber meaning plague. The same word that's used in the plague besides the word magepha concerning the plagues in Egypt, deber in this particular aspect. The plagues were Babylon, Assyria, Persia, Medes, Greeks, Arameans, Moabites. We read about Misha of Moab and what he said about Israel. We showed the pictures from the wall of Sennacherib. We read about the matter of Elephantine. Israel was getting pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed as great as they could up out of the land of Israel. That was the nation's goal. That's why when you read in Psalms 83, you see that particular aspect about the confederacy of the nations to cut the name of Yisrael off, that it be not a nation. You don't think there's a conspiracy to cut Israel off? Of who we are? You don't think there is? You remember, brothers and sisters, when Nick Cannon said we are the Hebrews and the Hebrews are black? Remember that thing with Nick Cannon? And he went live on TV and was talking about that. Then he apologized and gave money to the Jewish Association and so forth and so on, right? There's something that happened after the situation happened with Nick Cannon. Remember this? Beyonce and Kemet. They kind of overshadowed what Nick Cannon stated about blacks being the true Hebrews. Not too long after that, they had Beyonce go up there with some Egyptian kind of Hathor goddess looking kind of thing. And that got the people's attention distracted. Already having Nick Cannon apologize, people are ready to go to Kemet as opposed to thinking about Israel. That's something to be pointed out. That's part of that conspiracy to cut the name of Israel off so that it be not a nation. If Nick Cannon had continued to go hard with that or go different with that, that would have caused the ear to sit there and want to hear. There's a rap group called Sons of Man. They was brought out, correct me if I'm wrong, by the group called the Wu-Tang Clan. On the album of Sons of Man, they got Hebrew all over the album. Can't really promote that. You had the brother that go by the name of Killer Priest, knowing himself as an Israelite. You had the football player, may he rest in peace, reading Hebrew on Channel 2. So these were things that famous people were talking about and expounding upon us being the Hebrews. Shh. Don't talk about that. Here, take a bunch of this and don't dare sit there and speak about being the true Hebrews. That we know is a conspiracy made against the true house of Israel. All right? So that's the plague that cleaved to the house of Israel in that particular case. All right? Brothers and sisters, let us continue and close out. We already showed Israel when the Romans came into Israel from the north, going Israel to the south, and then Israel that was in the south of Rome or south of Rome, going south into and then west into Western Africa in that particular case. All right? Brothers and sisters, when we read in Deuteronomy 28, Mizraim, we want to point this out. The word Zar, which means trouble or distress in this particular aspect. And this is no disrespect, brothers and sisters, but we know good and well that Hebrew with vowels is how you'll be able to explain the matter of how Mizraim means double distress. All right, we're going to do a presentation on that as well. This is in South Carolina. slave house, or the mass house where the people were enslaved in. This is referred to as Boone territory in South Carolina, where the people were enslaved at. Now, we have here this lie saying that Anthony Johnson, a black man, was the pioneer of American slavery in the year 1655, when John Punch, brothers and sisters, was a slave in 1640. See, it was a crime, brothers and sisters, for us to read. We have to remember that. These people had it, brothers and sisters, as a law that we were not supposed to be reading. So after we were shipped in the Atlantic slave trade in many cases from Louisiana to Connecticut, all right, we see the diaspora of our people, even in America, going west, going there, going from the south to the north. So they say in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia went up the east coast of the United States, if we will. They in the states like Louisiana, Mississippi, went up to what we call Indiana and Illinois, if we will. And they of both went over to the west. My little one's mother has family in San Diego. My little one's mother family, in part, was part of that gold rush that went over there after slavery. So don't tell me slavery don't exist. And her last name is Washington, and she's a black woman. Okay, so here we have the diaspora shown within America from the south to the north and from the southeast going to the western part of the country. Brothers and sisters, this is things we want to point out for edification purposes. We're going to, brothers and sisters, believe it or not, close out, if we will, giving honor to the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. There's going to be more presentations. Subscribe to the channel. All right, Moray, Shaya Torah, lessons. Subscribe to the channel. Somray, Hob, Reed, headed by the brother by Moray, Yif, and so forth. All right. Somebody wrote off topic, but Amari Stoudemire from the Knicks made a documentary about Damona. Yeah, that's not off topic, my brother. I kind of heard of Amari Stoudemire. Thank you for that, because that has slipped my mind, but I did hear about that. Thank you. The brother Dora wrote, it was indeed pulling up records of my family history in NC. My great-grandfather's father did not know or taught how to read English. All right, so I'm going to have to ask Brother Dora, what part of North Carolina? Because mine goes back to Raleigh. So we might be related one way or the other. Who knows? You understand? I know of my biological father's side, that goes back to Virginia and enslavement. And like my mother's side goes back to like North Carolina. You understand? There's going to be more presentations, brothers and sisters. We want to show the secular source books that was here. Israelite history as it relates to the world. All right? Authored by Vincent Hutchinson. I pen named it after my father to give him honor. The other source and book is this. From Assyria to America. I've been reading out of this book as well during the presentation. You can get both of these books online. All right. I was asked here, am I able to have guests on live? on the channel. I'm going to find out how to do that with StreamYard very soon, because I want to interview people and have people, believe it or not, interview me. So yes, we're going to work on that, and I'll definitely keep people posted on that. 908-587-4841. All right. So that's my number to reach me by text or by calling. Those who want the books, you can reach me by that number, or you can go on Amazon and acquire it that way. That is up to you. The patronage will be definitely appreciated. This presentation is done for free of charge. I'm not into the Patreon thing and, I'm going to get paid for doing a presentation now. The books that are being sold, that's enough money to ask for the people. That's just my thing. You understand? So once it come down to that. All right. Shalom. Most High bless. Subscribe to the channel. Share the video. Be well. Most High bless. Shalom. That's my email. YISRAEL22@yahoo.com. There's going to be on this channel, Most High bless, a presentation tomorrow. That is January 10th at 10 a.m. on this channel on the Sabbath. Is it weekly, daily, monthly, or so forth? Stay tuned. 10 a.m. tomorrow in the morning. Presentation on the timing of the Shabbat. Peace to you. Shalom.